Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christopher Tirri. I teach 12th grade English at Kingswood Regional High School, and welcome to my reading workshop strategy lesson. The strategy I chose was creating mental images. And creating mental images while reading enhances developing readers' ability to recall and retain the text. It encourages them to effectively integrate sentence-level information. It helps readers make inferences and form a unified picture of the event described in the text. It fosters the ability to monitor comprehension while reading, and part of that is it allows readers to make, support, and revise predictions about the text. One other good thing that the authors don't mention is that using this strategy helps students avoid just skipping over those really long paragraphs that seem to be about nothing other than the setting or a character's physical appearance. The authentic text I chose to teach this lesson is William Golding's classic novel, Lord of the Flies. It coincided nicely with the unit that we're currently working on, which is all about the theme of man's inhumanity against man. So here's just the word-for-word connection that I started my lesson with, and I will show you a clip of it in the next slide. As we begin to read Lord of the Flies, I'm going to show you how to create mental images while reading to help you visualize the setting Golding creates. Good, active readers often visualize descriptive elements in a text without even knowing it, using both the words on the page and their repertoire of previous knowledge. Doing so helps them better understand the world the author is trying to create and the possible symbolic significance of imagery and setting. It is good to use this strategy when a text seems to be light on plot but heavy on description. So I've linked my actual mini lesson plan here if you are interested in seeing all of the details, but here's just an overview of what the lesson is going to include. Alright, so a good way to get a sense of the world that we're about to enter when it comes to reading a book is to look at the cover art that the author or the publisher has chosen. So, as a group, I just want us to tally all the different details that we can notice on the cover and what ideas we might get about the setting or the story from it. So I'll start us off, and I'm going to point out that I see that mountain in the background. I can't tell if it's a mountain or a volcano.
I'm looking at the idea of the red.
Okay.
It harkens back to like the communist propaganda posters during the Cold War where they're like, beware, and this is like the Lord of the Flies, so it feels like it's a horror setting.
Interesting. I see that even with the font. So the font kind of ties in with that color. Good.
I see he's in a defensive pose. He's holding his hand up as if he's afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And he's definitely looks scared and as if he's hiding or fighting someone off. So he looks very defensive.
Okay. So what I like about this clip is that obviously my students had some really great pieces of prior knowledge to bring to the discussion, pieces of knowledge I didn't even think of, but they also were able to really accurately gauge the fact that this is not the kind of novel where it's going to have a great story in terms of people being happy or people being safe at all times. So I think this opening discussion really helped prepare us for what's coming next. So in this next clip, I decided to just give them a little bit of modeling to help them hear what it's like to use this strategy rather than assuming they just knew what to do. Okay, so now that we've read the cover, in terms of looking at the image and seeing what it implies for us, we're then going to do the opposite. We're going to read a passage and I'm going to model for you what it sounds and looks like when I visualize the words on the page. As I'm reading and as I'm modeling, what I want you to do is just in your books, underline or highlight any words or phrases that you think are particularly evocative in terms of the setting, the imagery, what have you. Okay? So we're on the very first page of chapter 1, The Sound of the Shell in Lord of the Flies. The boy with fair hair lowered himself down the last few feet of rock and began to pick his way toward the lagoon. So, From that description, I'm now picturing him with blonde hair. I assume that fair means light. And if he's lowering himself down off the last few feet of rock, that must mean that he's high up. That wherever he has landed or ended up is not on our normal ground surface. So I'm thinking he might be on a cliff or a mountain or even like a ledge of some sort. Okay, so I just wanted to give a brief idea of what it looked like as I was modeling. That way students could hear the language I was using. And as you'll see, I had them annotating as I'm going along. I try to involve as many aspects of active engagement as possible. That way I'm not just sitting there reading at my students, and that way they can track their reading in multiple ways throughout a given lesson. So once I modeled out loud, I decided to incorporate the use of Post-its to help students keep track of what are the images in their heads looking like? What words are they picking up on that really start creating those vivid pictures in their heads? And as you'll see, I gave them two sets of Post-its, a set of blue ones and a set of yellow ones. Blue ones to use for any images or words that help them think of positive imagery, and yellow for anything that they think might be negative or concerning in any way. What we're going to do for this next passage is I've given you sets of Post-its. As I read, what I want us to do together is anything that we see that's a positive image that comes to mind, we want to jot that down on our blue Post-it notes, and then we're going to stick it on the page where it appears. Anything that's negative that we imagine, we're going to put it on the yellow Post-its. Okay? So, we're going to start at the very bottom of page 9. The shore was fledged with palm trees. These stood or leaned or reclined against the light, and their green feathers were 100 feet up in the air. Okay. So, I'm visualizing these palm trees, and the author tells us they're light, and they have their palm fronds are like green feathers. So, those two things seem pretty positive to me. So I'm going to go ahead and write light and their green feathers on my blue Post-it. And I'm going to go ahead and stick it right in that page. Okay, so once I introduced that little portion with using the Post-its, I then turned everything back to my students. As I read, I wanted them to interrupt me every time they had a positive image come to mind or a negative image come to mind. All right, so as I read the next paragraph, what I want all of you to do is continue using your Post-its, but I want you to raise your hand and interrupt me each time you want to put a certain word or phrase on your Post-it, okay? That way we can try to see if we're practicing this strategy. All right. He jumped down from the terrace. The sand was thick over his black shoes, and the heat hit him. Christy?
The heat hit him.
Okay.
I would say that was yellow.
Why?
Negative, because it implies the negative connotation. Like I feel like icky.
You feel icky?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going back to imagining that really humid environment. Like if you step out into that new environment, you're immediately hit with that big cloud of humidity.
Yes.
Good. He became conscious of the weight of his clothes.
I want to stop you there too, because
Okay.
that's implying the saturation of the sweat in his clothes, and you don't want that on you.
Good. So it's important to keep in mind our image of who Ralph is and what he looks like. And as Jay told us, if we're thinking about the weight of his clothes are not heavy by nature. It's because he sweat through them to the point where he saturated them with sweat. Good work. As we saw in that previous clip, my students were able to pretty actively and quickly offer up some of the mental images they were creating as I was doing that guided reading. It was almost instantaneous. What you'll see in this next clip is just how well they're able to apply that strategy to some independent practice where they're reading on their own, picking up where we left off. In the full clip that I've embedded in the Google slideshow, I conference with each of the 3 students. However, for the sake of time for this screencast, I'm just going to show the very first portion of when I conference with the first student on our right, Michelle. So now that we've practiced with me leading the conversation and then with all of you leading the conversation, what we're going to do is transition into some independent reading time. So you've all been assigned your characters and your settings, all that good stuff. So I want you to continue with this strategy while you're reading. So make sure you're pausing and you're keeping track of when do your images skew positive, when do they skew negative. And then I'll conference with each of you as you pick up where we left off from that last passage. Okay? Perfect. So what do we have?
I put a lot of memories back with childhood, so getting energy.
Okay, so who is this all describing? What character?
The boy with the fair hair.
Good. So we learned that his name was?
Ralph.
Good. Okay, so what words do you have on your blue post so far for innocence?
I have childhood.
Okay.
I have a mildness about his mouth, the crinkling or devil.
Good.
Indication that he's going to be kind of a good guy.
Good, and the fact that we have that it says no devil, so he's immediately the complete opposite of an evil person.
So I was wondering, like, should I put the devil down on the yellow too, just because it was brought up?
Interesting. So I would put it on the yellow as well. But it's so what I really like about my ability to conference with Michelle was we're seeing evidence that the mental image that she's trying to create has elements that are both positive and negative. And I like that she was able to verbalize this conflict almost of what this image looks like in her head. What does it mean that Ralph has a mouth that betrayed no devil, but the fact that the devil is nonetheless present in that description? Moving on, I ended the lesson prior to them having the rest of the period to work on their independent reading with the following link. All right, so before we split up into doing our independent reading for the rest of the class period, I just want to remind you that as you continue to read, make sure you're paying specific attention to the visuals and descriptions of the settings or of the characters. Rather than just skipping over these details like we might want to do, especially because we want to get to the plot, remember that their narrative function might be something worth considering, that they might even have some kind of symbolic meaning. I want you to use your close reading skills that you've demonstrated thus far, as well as your imaginations, to visualize these details, make predictions about what's going to happen next, and analyze their significance. Does that sound like something we can do?
Yes.
Awesome. What I think was particularly authentic about my application of the strategy was my use of I throughout the modeling portions. That way students knew exactly what I was thinking and that they were not somebody else's ideas. Second was my ability to use an authentic text that was actually already part of the 12th grade curriculum. And as an added bonus, that some students were already familiar with based on them having taken an AP psychology course at the school, which also incorporates this book. In terms of moments of success, I think how I made my thinking visible and explicit really encouraged my students to engage with the strategy, and it also made them more willing to practice the strategy with me. As we saw in some of the clips that I showed, they were very, very insightful with the visuals that they were offering, some of which I hadn't even thought about. And I think it's always a great marker of success if the teacher is able to learn something from their students. In terms of room for improvement, I wish I had used clearer language related to the strategy more often throughout the lesson. So saying things like, now I'm imagining, or the picture that comes to mind. That way students had more examples of how should they describe the mental images that they're creating while we're reading. Second, I wish I had included some more opportunities for students to turn and talk with a partner to discuss and compare their mental images. And finally, I wish I had also given them the chance to illustrate their mental images, whether it be on notebook paper, on the whiteboard, or on the Promethean board. Moving forward, I would like to encourage my students to not just verbalize their mental pictures in discussions, but also to be able to write down those descriptions in paragraph form, or to give more artistic students the ability to draw a series of pictures related to the ones that they have in their minds. And finally, I would also like to be able to have students choose another novel similar to Lord of the Flies That way they can not just demonstrate this strategy, but also demonstrate their ability to transfer it to new contexts.